My son's birthday toast ended with, "This is our final celebration." I only smiled and the birthday was not meant to be anything special. At least, that was how it was described. A small gathering. A few people. Nothing fancy. Just a simple evening put together by the sun. That was what everyone was told, and that was what most people expected when they arrived. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. The house was clean but not decorated much. A few balloons were tied near the dining table. They looked like they had been bought on the way home, not planned weeks in advance. A plain cake sat in the center of the table, white frosting, no message written on top. Just candles waiting to be lit. Soft music played from a small speaker in the corner. It was not loud enough to fill the room, only enough to stop the silence from feeling too heavy. Friends and relatives began arriving one by one. They smiled, greeted each other, exchanged polite words. Some carried small gift bags. Others came empty-handed, assuming their presence was enough. The mood was calm, almost quiet, like everyone was careful not to say the wrong thing. People laughed at the right moments, but the laughter faded quickly, as if it had a time limit. The son moved around the room, greeting guests, offering drinks, pointing people toward chairs. He was polite, respectful. He did everything right on the surface. But something about him felt distant. His smile appeared and disappeared quickly. His eyes rarely stayed in one place for long. When people spoke to him, he listened, nodded, responded, but without depth. Like he was present in body, not fully in heart. Then the parent arrived. They stepped inside quietly, holding a small wrapped gift. Nothing expensive. Just something chosen with care. The parent did not look around with excitement or expectation. They had learned long ago not to expect too much. Being invited was already enough. Being remembered was enough. They smiled gently at the familiar faces and returned the greetings with warmth that felt real, not forced. The son noticed them right away. He walked over and gave a short hug. It was not cold, but it was brief. Just long enough to appear proper. He said, "I'm glad you came," in a calm voice. The words were kind, but they did not carry much emotion. The parents smiled and replied that they were happy to be there. And they meant it. They took a seat near the edge of the room. Not in the center, not demanding attention. Just somewhere comfortable, where they could watch and listen. The parent liked observing people. It helped them understand what words sometimes hid. As the evening went on, they noticed small things others might miss. The son spoke more freely with friends than with family. He laughed louder with them, leaned closer, shared inside jokes. When relatives tried to start deeper conversations, he gently redirected them to lighter topics. Work updates. Weather. Traffic. Safe subjects. Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. The parent noticed this pattern without reacting. They had seen it before, just not this clearly. Over the years, conversations between them and the son had grown shorter. Calls were less frequent. Visits felt rushed. The parent never complained. They told themselves that life was busy, that this was normal, that distance did not always mean loss. But tonight, the distance felt louder. The parent watched as the son checked his phone often. Not nervously. More like waiting. As if something else was on his mind. Each time the screen lit up, his expression changed slightly. Not happy. Not angry. Just focused. Like he was preparing himself. Someone suggested taking photos. People gathered near the table. The parent stood slowly, joining the group. They stood slightly off to the side, not wanting to push forward. The son did not pull them closer, but he did not push them away either. The photo was taken. Smiles frozen for a second. Then everyone returned to their places. The cake was brought out next. Candles were lit. The room grew quiet as everyone gathered around again. Someone joked about age. Someone else laughed too loudly. The parent clapped softly with the others, their smile steady. They did not feel sadness. Not yet. They felt calm, grounded, content just to witness the moment. As the song was sung, the parent looked at the sun. Not at the candles. Not at the crowd. Just at him. They remembered holding him as a child. Remembered birthdays filled with noise, mess, and excitement. Remembered the way he used to run toward them without hesitation. Those memories did not hurt. They felt warm. Real. They were proof that love had existed, even if it had changed. The song ended. The candles were blown out. Applause followed. The sun thanked everyone. His voice was clear, confident, but still distant. People began eating cake, talking again. The volume in the room rose slightly, then settled back into a comfortable hum. The parent took a small bite of cake and listened to the conversations around them. They noticed how often the son avoided sitting near them. Not obviously, just naturally. Always ending up a few steps away. No one was rude. No one was unkind. That was what made it harder to name what felt wrong. Everything looked fine. But it did not feel connected. The parent did not try to force closeness. They did not ask questions that might make the son uncomfortable. They did not bring up the past. They sat quietly, responding when spoken to, smiling when appropriate. Inside, they felt a familiar understanding settle in. This celebration was real, but it was also careful, planned, controlled. As the evening went on, the parent noticed a shift. The son grew more serious. He stopped laughing as much. He stood up straighter. He looked around the room as if checking who was listening. The parent sensed that something was coming, though they did not know what. Still, they remained calm. They had not come for speeches or attention. They had come because they were invited. Because they cared. Because love does not always need to be loud. The parent held their gift in their lap, unopened. They were in no hurry to give it. There was time. Or so they thought. Around them, the celebration continued. Plates were cleared. Drinks were refilled. Conversations flowed in circles. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like a normal family gathering. But beneath the polite smiles and soft music, something unspoken rested in the air. The parent felt it clearly. This birthday was not just a celebration. It was a moment. And moments like this, they knew, often revealed more than words ever could. The evening had reached a point where people felt comfortable. Plates were half empty. Conversations overlapped. Some guests leaned back in their chairs, relaxed, believing the main moments of the night were already behind them. The parent thought the same. The cake had been cut. Photos had been taken. Nothing else was expected. That was when the son stood up. At first, no one noticed. He simply rose from his chair and cleared his throat. The sound was soft but enough to draw attention. One by one, conversations faded. Chairs stopped moving. A few people turned with curious smiles, expecting a light-hearted comment or a quick thank you. The son lifted his glass. "I just want to say a few words," he began. His voice was steady, calm, polite, the kind of tone people trusted. Several guests smiled. Someone nodded encouragingly. This felt normal, appropriate. A birthday toast was expected, after all. The son looked around the room briefly, then continued. He spoke about growing older. About how time moves faster than people expect. About how life changes in ways no one plans for. His words were careful, almost thoughtful. He mentioned family, gratitude, and the importance of moments shared. A few guests murmured in agreement. Someone whispered that it was a nice speech. Another guest raised their glass slightly, already preparing to toast back. The parent listened quietly. They sat still, hands folded, eyes on the son. They noticed how he avoided looking directly at them. Not fully. just enough to suggest intention. His gaze passed over them, then moved on. The parent did not feel nervous. They felt alert. The son paused for a moment, as if choosing his next words carefully. "Birthdays make you think," he said. "They remind you that nothing stays the same forever." A few guests chuckled softly. Someone joked about getting older. The tension remained low, comfortable. Then the son smiled. Not widely, not warmly, just enough to soften what came next. "So I want to say this," he continued, lifting his glass a little higher. "This will probably be the last time we celebrate together like this." The room changed instantly. The silence did not arrive all at once. It spread slowly, like a wave. One laugh cut off mid-sound. A fork paused halfway to a plate. Someone shifted in their seat, unsure what they had just heard. A few guests laughed awkwardly, assuming it was a joke that hadn't landed properly. One person glanced around, looking for reassurance. Another smiled uncertainly, waiting for the punchline. But no punchline came. The son took a small sip from his glass. He did not rush to explain. He did not laugh. He did not soften his words. He simply stood there, composed, as if what he had said required no clarification. The parent understood immediately. There was no confusion, no doubt. The tone was too measured, too deliberate. This was not humor. This was not exaggeration. It was a statement. The parent felt something settle deep inside them. Not shock. Not anger. Recognition. Around them, the room struggled to catch up. Someone cleared their throat. Another guest tried to restart the moment by lifting their glass and saying, "Well, let's not think like that." The words floated awkwardly and fell flat. The son nodded politely at the comment, but did not correct himself. He did not take his words back. He simply added, "Life moves on. We all make choices." That was all. He lowered his glass and sat down. The toast ended without applause. For a moment, no one knew what to do. Conversations did not resume right away. People avoided eye contact. Some stared at their plates. Others pretended to be busy with their phones. The celebration that once felt carefully controlled now felt fragile. The parent remained still. They did not look around. They did not search faces for reactions. They did not ask for explanations. Their expression did not change. If anything, it softened. They had heard this message before. Not in words, but in actions. In missed calls. In rushed visits. In conversations that never went deeper than the surface. Tonight, the son had simply chosen to say it out loud. The parent felt no need to respond. Someone nearby whispered, "Did he mean that?" Another replied quietly, "I don't think he was joking." The whispers carried just enough to confirm what everyone sensed. The son picked up his fork and began eating again, as if nothing unusual had happened. His posture remained relaxed. He spoke quietly to the person beside him about something unrelated. The contrast was striking. The parent watched him for a brief moment. They noticed how comfortable he seemed. How prepared. This was not impulsive. This had been decided long before tonight. A guest finally tried to bring the mood back. They raised their voice slightly and said something cheerful about the cake. A few people followed, grateful for the distraction. Slowly, forced laughter returned. Conversations restarted, though they felt thinner now, more cautious. The parent took a slow breath. They did not feel humiliated. They did not feel small. What they felt was clarity. This was not a rejection spoken in anger. It was distance spoken calmly. And that, the parent knew, was harder to argue with. They looked down at the gift still resting in their lap. It remained unopened. The ribbon untouched. They gently adjusted it, as if making sure it was still neat. The parent's mind did not race. Memories did not overwhelm them. Instead, There was a quiet acceptance. The kind that comes when something finally matches what you have already felt. Across the room, the son laughed softly at something someone said. The sound did not hurt. It confirmed. A relative glanced toward the parent with concern, then looked away quickly, unsure whether comfort was welcome. The parent offered a small smile, reassuring without words. They were not broken by the statement. They were not surprised. They were simply aware. The celebration continued, but it had changed shape. The warmth that once felt rehearsed now felt strained. Everyone sensed it, even if no one spoke about it openly. The parent remained seated, calm, grounded, present. They understood something important in that moment. When someone tells you who they are, clearly and without emotion, it is not cruelty. It is truth. And the parent chose to listen. The moment after the toast lingered longer than anyone expected. Even as conversations slowly returned, something invisible had settled into the room. It did not shout. It did not demand attention. It simply stayed, pressing gently against every word spoken afterward. The parent remained seated for a few seconds, then stood calmly. There was no sudden movement, no sharp breath taken in. Just a quiet decision made without urgency. They adjusted their posture, smoothed their clothes, and looked around the room. Then they smiled. It was not a forced smile. It was not wide or dramatic. It was the kind of smile people use when they have already made peace with something, even if no one else has. The kind that carries restraint instead of reaction. That smile changed the room again. Some guests noticed immediately. Others sensed it without understanding why. The tension did not break, it deepened. People had expected something else. A reaction. A question. A visible sign of hurt. Anything that would make sense of what had just been said. But there was nothing. The parent began moving through the room slowly, greeting people one by one. They thanked them for coming. They commented politely on the food, the music, the effort put into the evening. Their voice was calm and steady. No cracks. No edge. A relative tried to say something supportive, lowering their voice and touching the parent's arm lightly. The parent listened, nodded, and offered the same gentle smile. No explanation followed. No reassurance was asked for. Across the room, the son watched. At first, he appeared relieved. The lack of confrontation seemed to confirm what he had hoped, that the moment would pass quietly. But as the minutes went on, something shifted in his expression. His eyes followed the parent more closely now. He noticed the calm, the ease, the absence of reaction. It unsettled him. This was not what he had prepared for. He had expected emotion. Any kind would have worked. Anger he could dismiss. Tears he could frame as overreaction. Even guilt would have given him something solid to respond to. But silence, paired with grace, offered no opening. The parent did not approach him. They did not ask for clarification. They did not ask why. They did not try to defend themselves or the past. They moved as though the toast had been nothing more than a passing remark. That choice echoed louder than words. Guests exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked impressed. A few felt uneasy, sensing that they were witnessing something private they did not fully understand. The celebration continued, but it felt different now. Conversations were shorter. Laughter came later, quieter. People checked the time more often. The warmth that had once felt staged now felt uncertain. The parents sat again for a while, listening more than speaking. They nodded when spoken to. They laughed softly at appropriate moments. They did not dominate any space. Inside, they were not empty. They were clear. They understood that responding would only give the moment more power. That explaining would invite debate. That asking questions would only lead to answers already known. Some truths do not need confirmation. At one point, the son stood and moved closer, stopping a few steps away. He hesitated, as if expecting the parent to speak first. When they did not, he cleared his throat and said something casual about the evening going well. The parent smiled at him. "Yes," they replied. "You did a good job." The words were simple, honest, free of accusation. The son nodded, unsure how to respond. He waited, perhaps expecting more. An opening. A reaction. But none came. The parent turned their attention back to the guests. That was when the silence grew heavy. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just present. It followed the son as he returned to his seat. It sat beside him as he picked at his plate. It stayed with him as conversations resumed around him. He tried to engage, but his responses were shorter now. Less confident. The parent continued doing something very deliberate. They treated the evening as complete. They thanked the host again. They complimented a guest's outfit. They helped clear a few plates without being asked. Each action was small, polite, intentional. Nothing was left unresolved on the surface. And that made it harder to ignore what lay beneath. Eventually, the parent picked up their gift. Still unopened. Still neat. They did not announce their departure. They did not draw attention to it. They simply moved toward the door when the moment felt right. A few guests noticed and stood to say goodbye. The parent thanked them warmly. They wished them safe travels. They spoke with sincerity. When they reached the son, they paused. They looked at him directly now. Not with sadness. Not with disappointment. With understanding. "Thank you for the evening," the parent said. The son opened his mouth, then closed it again. He nodded. He said, "Of course." His voice sounded different than before. Less certain. The parent smiled one last time. Then they left. The door closed quietly behind them. No argument followed. No raised voices. No scene. But the room felt smaller without them. Someone exhaled loudly, as if only then realizing they had been holding their breath. Another guest commented softly that it had been an unusual toast. No one disagreed. The son remained seated for a moment longer than necessary. He stared at his plate without seeing it. The silence the parent left behind did not fade when they did. It stayed. Later, after more guests left and the house began to empty, the son replayed the moment in his mind. The calm smile. The polite goodbye. The absence of emotion. He realized something then. That smile had not been weakness. It had been control. The parent had chosen not to fight for space in a moment that was no longer theirs to win. They had chosen dignity over defense. And that choice left no room for excuses. Because silence, when chosen carefully, says everything. Long after the celebration ended, the words of the toast faded from memory. But the smile remained. And the quiet way the parent walked away carried more weight than anything that could have been said. After the door closed and the last footsteps faded, the house felt different to the son. It was quieter, but not calm. The kind of quiet that makes thoughts sound louder. He stood near the table for a while, picking up empty glasses, moving plates that did not really need moving. It gave his hands something to do while his mind stayed busy. He felt relieved. The feeling surprised him at first, but he did not reject it. Instead, he told himself this was what honesty felt like. Clean. Direct. Final. He had said what he believed needed to be said, and now it was out in the open. No more pretending. No more half-truths. For a long time, he believed the problem had been control. Growing up, he often felt guided too closely. Advice came quickly. Warnings followed small mistakes. Concern was always present, sometimes before he even asked for it. Even when the intentions were good, it felt heavy to him. Like he was always being watched, measured, corrected. As he got older, those feelings did not fade. They changed shape. What once felt like protection began to feel outdated. He told himself the parent did not understand the modern world. Their values seemed old. Their worries felt unnecessary. The way they spoke about responsibility, patience, and loyalty sounded like rules from another time. He started believing that the parent no longer fit into the life he was building. To him, independence meant space. And space meant distance. He watched friends talk openly about separating from family. They used words like freedom and growth. They said cutting ties helped them breathe again. Those stories stayed with him. They made his own thoughts feel reasonable, even brave. So when he planned the toast, he did not see it as cruel. He saw it as honest. He believed that saying it out loud was better than letting things slowly fade. Better than quiet distance filled with confusion. In his mind, clarity was kindness. He told himself that clear endings were healthier than endless tension. When he replayed the moment, he focused on his words, not the reaction. This will probably be the last time we celebrate together like this. To him, it sounded calm, measured, not angry, not emotional. He believed that tone mattered more than impact. He noticed how some guests reacted awkwardly, but he dismissed it. They did not understand the history, he told himself. They only saw the surface. They did not carry years of frustration, the quiet sense of being held back. In his mind, the parent represented a past version of himself he was trying to leave behind. He believed that holding on emotionally would slow him down. That staying connected meant staying influenced. And he did not want influence anymore. What he wanted was control over his own life. Setting that boundary made him feel strong, even proud. He told himself it took courage to say hard things. That many people avoided truth because they feared discomfort. He believed he had chosen growth over comfort. The calm way the parent reacted only reinforced his thinking. If they did not protest, then maybe they understood. If they smiled and left quietly, then maybe this separation was mutual. He did not consider that silence could mean something else. As the evening ended and guests slowly left, he replayed the night again. He focused on how steady his voice had been, how controlled his words were. He believed he had handled it well. In his mind, he had finally drawn a line. No more emotional weight. No more expectations. No more feeling pulled backward. He stood alone in the quiet room and felt certain of one thing. He believed he had done the right thing. And believing that made it easier not to look deeper. Because if honesty was not cruelty, then there was nothing to regret. At least, that was what he told himself. After the birthday passed, nothing happened. At least, nothing visible. There were no arguments. No messages asking for explanations. No late-night calls filled with emotion. The parent did not announce distance or demand space. They simply stepped back. Slowly. Quietly. Days passed. Then weeks. The parent did not call to check in. They did not ask how work was going. They did not offer reminders or advice. There were no gentle warnings about health, money, or choices. No follow-ups. No small gestures meant to stay connected. There was no anger in the silence. Only absence. The son did not notice right away. Life moved forward as usual. Mornings were busy. Evenings were full. Messages came from friends. Plans were made. Work demanded attention. The quiet felt normal at first, even freeing. There was no one asking questions. No one offering opinions. He told himself this was what independence felt like. The weeks blended together. The parent's name did not appear on his phone. At first, he assumed they were simply busy. Then he realized he had not reached out either. The thought crossed his mind briefly, then passed. Nothing felt urgent. Until small things began to surface. It started with a minor problem. Something he would normally solve quickly. A decision that usually came easily felt heavier than expected. He caught himself thinking, for just a moment, about asking for advice. Then he stopped. He reminded himself that he did not need it. Another situation followed. A delay. A mistake. Nothing serious, but enough to cause irritation. He searched for answers online, asked a friend, waited longer than he would have before. The solution came, but slower. He told himself this was normal. Then came a practical inconvenience. Something he had always assumed would be handled, quietly and reliably. It was not. He felt annoyed, not concerned. Still, he did not connect it to the silence. Over time, the absence grew more noticeable. There were moments when he expected a message and none arrived. Moments when he waited for a reminder that never came. He began double-checking things he used to trust without thinking. Bills. Dates. Details. The support had never been loud. That was why its absence took time to register. The parent had always operated quietly in the background, offering help before it was asked for, filling gaps without attention, anticipating problems before they became problems. Now, those gaps remained open. The son adjusted, but each adjustment cost him something. Time. Energy. Patience. He grew more tired. Not overwhelmed, but strained. He noticed himself pausing more often, unsure. The confidence he had felt after the toast dulled slightly. Not enough to worry him. Just enough to irritate him. He still did not reach out. Pride played its part. So did habit. Days turned into more weeks. The silence continued. No birthday follow-ups. No casual check-ins. No unspoken safety net. The parent had not disappeared. They had withdrawn. And they had done it without punishment or drama. The son told himself that this was proof he had been right. That the relationship had always been unnecessary weight. That he was managing just fine. But sometimes, late at night, he felt the strain more clearly. He thought of conversations he once dismissed. Advice he once ignored. Warnings he once rolled his eyes at. He told himself he did not miss the parent. What he missed, he insisted, was convenience. Still, the silence continued. No pressure. No reminders. No safety net quietly catching him before he fell. And for the first time, he began to realize something he had never considered before. Absence does not announce itself. It reveals itself. Slowly. In the smallest ways. And once noticed, it cannot be unseen. Months passed before the understanding arrived. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It came quietly, the same way the distance had. Life kept moving. The son stayed busy. Work changed. Responsibilities grew. Days filled themselves easily. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. He managed. He adapted. He solved problems on his own. But something felt different. Not missing. He did not feel abandoned. What he felt was the absence of something he had never named. It showed up in moments of pause. When decisions carried more weight than expected. When setbacks felt heavier. When success felt less satisfying because there was no one quietly steady in the background. One evening, he caught himself smiling at something small and instinctively reaching for his phone. Then he stopped. There was no one to call. That moment stayed with him longer than it should have. He began thinking about the birthday again. About the toast. About the room falling silent. About the smile. At first, he had taken it as agreement. Or indifference. Maybe even relief. Now, it looked different. He replayed the image of the parent standing calmly, smiling without tension, moving through the room with ease. There had been no hurt visible. No anger. No defense. At the time, he thought that meant he had won. Now, he wondered if it meant something else entirely. He realized the parent had not smiled to forgive him. They had smiled to let go. That distinction settled slowly, but once it did, it stayed. Forgiveness asks for repair. It waits. It hopes. Acceptance does not. The parent had not accepted the words. They had accepted the truth behind them. That the relationship had become one-sided. That effort flowed in one direction. That love, when carried alone for too long, turns into exhaustion. The parent had not argued because there was nothing left to prove. They had not asked questions because the answers were already clear. They had not fought because they were done chasing. That realization made the smile heavier than any argument could have been. The son began noticing how much of his life had been supported quietly before. Not through control, but through presence. Not through pressure, but through consistency. The parent had been there without asking to be acknowledged. Until they stopped. And when they stopped, they did not announce it. They simply stepped back and allowed the son to live exactly the independence he had claimed to want. The smile was not weakness. It was closure. Not a dramatic ending. A final understanding. The parent had chosen peace over persistence. That choice did not come from defeat. It came from clarity. The son felt something shift inside him then. Not guilt. Not anger. Recognition. He saw that the silence was not meant to teach him a lesson. It was meant to protect the parent. For the first time, he understood that boundaries are not always loud. Sometimes they arrive quietly, with dignity, and leave you alone with your thoughts. He did not confront the parent. There was no conversation. No apology formed. Because this realization was not about words. It was about meaning. And meaning, once understood, does not need explanation. The smile returned to his mind again, clearer now. It had not been surrender. It had been an ending. And endings, he was beginning to understand, do not always come with noise. Sometimes, they come with grace. When the son finally reached out, it was not planned. It happened on an ordinary day. No holiday. No crisis. Just a quiet moment when the weight of silence felt heavier than usual. He stared at his phone for a long time before sending a short message. Nothing emotional. Nothing complicated. Just a simple greeting. The reply came later than he expected. Not delayed enough to feel ignored. Not quick enough to feel eager. It was polite, calm, respectful, and distant. The words were kind, but they did not lean forward. There were no questions wrapped inside them. No warmth reaching beyond what was necessary. The message did not invite more. It acknowledged, then rested. The son felt it immediately. Something had changed. When they spoke later, the tone was the same. Calm voices. Measured words. No tension. No bitterness. The parent listened without interruption, responded without judgment, and kept the conversation light. Too light. There were no follow-up questions about his life. No quiet concern hidden inside advice. No attempt to guide the conversation somewhere deeper. The parent was present, but not available. At first, the son assumed it was temporary. A natural result of time apart. He told himself things would ease back into familiar patterns if he stayed consistent. They did not. Each conversation followed the same shape. Polite beginnings. Neutral middle. Gentle endings. Nothing to argue with. Nothing to hold on to. The parent did not reach out between conversations. They did not ask when they would speak again. They did not fill silence. The son began noticing the difference in himself. He spoke more carefully now. He chose words with intention. He felt the need to explain himself more, even when no explanation was requested. The parent listened. And let him finish. There was no urgency to respond. No emotional pull. Just calm acknowledgement. The authority he once felt from the parent was gone. In its place was something steadier. Self-respect. The parent was no longer adjusting their boundaries to maintain closeness. They were no longer chasing understanding. They were no longer offering themselves as emotional support on demand. They were not cold. They were complete. The son sensed it in the pauses. In the way the parent did not rush to reassure him. In the way they did not soften their words to protect his comfort. This was not punishment. It was balance. The parent had learned to meet him where he stood, not where they hoped he would be. And that changed everything. The son realized that reconciliation was no longer something he could assume. It was no longer guaranteed by time or effort alone. It was no longer something the parent was willing to buy at the cost of their own peace. The relationship still existed. But it had rules now. Unspoken ones. Mutual ones. The parent spoke with kindness, but also with limits. They shared, but selectively. They listened, but did not absorb. For the first time, the son felt unsure of his position. Not rejected. Just not centered. He began to understand that the parent was no longer measuring their worth by his response. They were no longer waiting to be chosen. That realization unsettled him. Because authority had once felt like control. Now, it looked like dignity. And dignity does not ask to be needed. It stands on its own. The son ended the call feeling something he had not expected. Respect. Not demanded. Not explained. Simply present. And he understood, perhaps too late, that the dynamic had shifted permanently. The parent was no longer holding the relationship together alone. They were holding themselves together instead. Time did what arguments never could. It settled things. The son did not experience a single moment of regret or realization. There was no dramatic turning point. No sudden apology. What came instead was understanding, built slowly from repetition. He noticed how careful he had become with his words. How often he paused before speaking, replaying past moments in his mind. He began to understand that words, once released, do not disappear just because time passes. They change shape. They take root. The toast, once delivered casually, had not ended the relationship in that moment. It had reshaped it. He learned that honesty without care can still wound. That truth spoken without responsibility does not stay neutral. It travels. It settles. It alters what follows. He saw now that independence does not require emotional erasure. That strength is not proven by distance alone. And that boundaries, once drawn, do not always move back. The parent learned something too. They learned that love does not mean enduring everything quietly. That patience, when extended too far, becomes self-neglect. They learned that protecting peace is not abandonment. It is choice. They had stopped explaining themselves. Stopped justifying their feelings. Stopped proving their value through sacrifice. And in that stillness, they found balance. The relationship did not disappear. It transformed. It became smaller, more careful, more honest. Not built on expectation, but on consent. Not held together by obligation, but by respect. The parent no longer waited to be understood. The son no longer assumed understanding was automatic. Both carried the weight of what had been said, in different ways. The lesson did not come with raised voices or final speeches. It arrived quietly, through distance, reflection, and the steady passing of time. Sometimes the strongest response isn't confrontation. It's letting someone live with the meaning of their own words.